Hello, my name is Vanessa. Welcome back to my channel. It has been a minute since I made a video because I was in Japan and then I didn't have a video planned for that, so I do apologize. This is like a month after my last video. So I wanted to go through a couple of the books that I've read recently that I have not talked about on this channel because I did read 4 or 5 books when I was in Japan, and then I have a couple from before that, so I just wanted to quickly do a quick video, reading wrap-up video. I'm debating where to start because it's kind of blending in with my basically year-long romantasy reading vlog that I've been working on, which hopefully is coming soon. But so I'm gonna skip all of those romantasy books that I've read, which is most of my reading year, and go to some of the other books that I've read in the meantime. I've talked about The Unworthy on a short that I've done, as well as like some TikToks that I've made, but I did read The Unworthy by Augustina Bazterrica, which was a short little 160-page horror book, which was so gross and dreadful, and it was wonderful. And I personally really liked it. I did see that a lot of people found it quite confusing. I did not have that experience. This is a first-person horror novella about this girl, and she does not remember her life before the apocalypse. So an apocalypse is currently taking place in this world. There's all these natural disasters. Earth has been obliterated by all of that, and a lot of people are dead. But she is currently in this convent, in this like walled-off tiny little convent with all of these different women who are also like nuns of this convent, and they worship this man named Him, and they never see his face, and they don't know much about him, but they you know, like worship him every single day. There are these different levels to this convent. So there's this lower level, which is called the Unworthy, which is our main character is part of the Unworthy. And then there are the Chosen, and then there are the Enlightened. And the Chosen are these women who are from the Unworthy. They are chosen for being like having spiritual gifts in some ways, but they are then mutilated in different ways to enhance these spiritual gifts. So some of the Chosen have their eyes gouged out, some of the Chosen have their mouths stapled shut basically, and these are supposed to like represent different types of spiritual gifts. It's very disturbing. It's very sick and twisted, but a lot of the Unworthy do want to be one of the Chosen, or like they want to, but they're also terrified because they do see what happens to these women. But they want to ascend basically to the Enlightenment, and the Enlightened are taken and never seen again, but it is supposed that they get to live a very like spiritually enlightened, enriched life with himself. So this is about our main character and her kind of desire to become enlightened, but then some stuff kind of starts happening for her where there is a stranger that ends up in the walls of the convent, and they mostly turn these people away unless it is an unblemished woman. So obviously with the environmental disasters, a lot of people end up being impaired or blemished in some way. Those people are killed, or basically they imply that they are killed or they're sent away to go die in the wilderness. But this woman was completely unblemished. So our main character wants to protect her from the fate of the convent and wants to kind of like keep her as her own secret. So she ends up kind of hiding her for a while, and they have this like relationship that blossoms, and she starts finding her humanity again, and in that time she starts kind of uncovering mysteries about her past, and it is very brutal. It is very devastating. It is super interesting, and I just thought for such a short book, it like made me feel so many things. Came away like dazed after the night that I read this, and I've just been recommending it to people a lot who can kind of stomach some more like gross, disturbing horror. So if that sounds interesting to you, I do recommend it. It was very good. I have not read Tender is the Flesh yet. If that is more disturbing than this, then that it would be kind of nuts, but I'm interested to read it now. So that was The Unworthy. I really liked that one. I also read Amal El-Motar's new book, The River Has Roots, and I have not read How to Lose the Time War. So if it is very poetic, that one, I will say this one is no different. This is also a novella, and it is also very poetic. It is very atmospheric. It is definitely for the vibes readers, and for a long time I thought I was gonna rate this 5 stars because I listened to the audiobook, which was an immersive audiobook, and if you could do this on audiobook, I highly recommend it because it was so like, you know, Army Dreamers by Kate Bush. This book feels exactly like that song sounds. It is about these 2 girls, and they live on the edge of this river, at the edge of this forest, which is essentially like that forest beyond is the fairy world, I guess you could say. And the river is kind of enchanted with a similar magic, which they called grammar. It's really interesting. They don't like super expand upon the concept of grammar as magic, but is kind of like interwoven in within the prose in this very beautiful kind of way. But her sister ends up falling in love with a fae from, you know, beyond the river. And it is ultimately, of course it is like a fairy tale story, and it's kind of written with a more detached tone in the way that a lot of like fairy tale, like folk tales would be told. Like it feels very much like a folk tale that has been passed down through generations. So it's a little bit detached in that way, but it is still very beautiful. And it is mostly just essentially about like this tragically beautiful relationship between these two sisters, and just like this sisterly bond that they do have, and how much like one sister is willing to give up for the other, and how different that they are, but just like the love that's there and what they're willing to sacrifice. As a sister girl myself, yes, I cried very hard in this because I love my sister. I have a younger sister, I have an older sister, and she would sacrifice so much for me. And I don't know, it was just very, very touching. I really, as a fairy girl, as someone who likes atmospheric books, who's a vibes reader, who loves my sister, who loves sisterly bond stories, this just hit in so many different ways. I didn't ultimately end up giving it 5 stars, just because it is kind of a short book, and the magic of it is a little bit wishy-washy. Not that that's objectively a bad thing. It just didn't feel like a 5-star book to me, ultimately, at the end of the day, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I think that it was very touching, and it was a really nice read, and it made me feel very deeply, and the audiobook was wonderful. They do, like, there's a lot of singing involved. Like, these two sisters have singing magic, and they're able to connect kind of to that like fairy world through song, and they're able to like harmonize with the river and the nature around where they live. And when they sing in the audiobook, they actually, like, there is singing in the background, and it is kind of like this I think it's Arabic, or is it Farsi, kind of infused language that they sing in, and it is very, very beautiful, and it is very, very evocative, and it is very emotional. So I really enjoyed that as well. I think it was great for one day. I would say I don't think about it that much. Like, I'm thinking about it now because I'm bringing it up in a wrap up, but I haven't really thought about that book that much. But it was still definitely worth the read, and I did really enjoy it as a vibes reader and a sister girl. Sorry, I'm going so fast. I'm trying to make this a short video. The next book that I read is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This was my second T. Kingfisher of the year. T. Kingfisher was my most read author of last year. So this is one of T. Kingfisher's horror books. And I have personally come to the conclusion that I like T. Kingfisher's horror books more than I like T. Kingfisher's fantasy books, which it's really interesting to me as someone whose primary genre is fantasy. I just think that T. Kingfisher is so good at like comical horror, and is able to lean into an uncanny factor that I think I appreciate more in the horror than I do in the fantasy. I've walked away from a lot of T. Kingfisher fantasy books really enjoying it, but not reflecting on it at all. Like, I don't think I could tell you a single plot point from Nettle and Bone at this point, which I thought was going to be like one of my all-time favorite books, but I liked it, but I just don't feel anything else about it. But anyway, A House with Good Bones is an Appalachian horror, which if you know me, you know that I like Appalachian horrors. I think that a lot of freak shit horror stuff goes down in Appalachia because of these ancient forests over here, and I just think it's a very, very fascinating culture within America. So I always just like to see I just like to see stories from it. And it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but is T. Kingfisher from North Carolina? Because I'm getting that vibe. Anyway, but this is about this woman in her 30s, and she goes to go visit her mom because her brother tells her that their mom is acting really off and she needs someone there. So she goes to visit her in her North Carolina home, and as she walks in, she realizes like everything about the home is different. Like, the walls that were cluttered and had this like bright paint all over it are totally bare, and everything is white. It is not reminiscent of her mom's personality at all. The painting that was on the wall has been replaced with this like hideous Confederacy painting that like belonged to her grandmother that they put in the attic because they didn't want to look at it anymore because it's horribly racist. That's back on the wall, and she's been like trying to ask her mom, like, Mom, is there any reason why everything is different here? And her mom is just acting really strange. So she starts kind of observing her behavior, and her mom is acting weird. For example, before she steps into a room, sometimes she'll look in and she'll like look side to side before going down a hallway. And the sorts of things that she cares about are different. Her priorities have changed. She starts wanting to pray before dinner. She starts scolding her daughter for cursing, which was like never a problem before. Her mom used to have a sailor's mouth. Everything is just really, really, really weird. And another weird thing that's happening is the vultures that belong to the neighbor across the street, who's always been accused of witchcraft, are now totally observing their house 24/7, total surveillance by these vultures, as if they're like waiting for something dead to come up so that they could prey on it. It was like a really fun book, I thought. Again, it was like not too long of a book, and I was gripped the whole time. I really had no idea what was going to happen, and then I started catching on, and it kind of is like a generational trauma story about like a woman and a family. And this is something I've said about T. Kingfisher before, but I don't know if she has like grandma issues or mommy issues or something, but there's always sort of like this kind of malignant presence having to deal with a older female figure, and I find that really, really interesting. But this is a mommy issues book, and if you think any of those themes are interesting, I highly recommend it. Overall, either way, it is a pretty intriguing horror book. The stakes at the end, just some of the imagery at the end was just so ridiculous, but also it was like so blood curdling to me and kind of icky and bone chilling. I just loved it. I loved like what she did at the end. It reminded me of like a Resident Evil or something like that. Like it was just really fun. So I enjoyed that book. That was A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. And I already talked about it, but I also read the entirety of the Mask of Mirrors trilogy. This was such a roller coaster for me. This took up a good 2 months of my life because if you don't know, these books are so dense to the point where it's like, I don't think I could just recommend this to anybody. You have to have the glossary open, you have to have the wiki open to read these books because this world building is just so elaborate and it is so detailed, and I guess I was just in the mood to enter a completely foreign world and be completely immersed in all these new terms and everything like that. And that's exactly what I got, and I thought it was like just really interesting. It's this Venetian inspired fantasy stories, and the world building for it is essentially like there are these noble houses and they're in charge of different charters. Like they definitely have a lot of political power and they have different seats in the house, and there are these like noble families, and it kind of is like a high society story. It's about this girl named Ren, and she is a street rat, meaning she came from this like child knot, which is like a child's gang, where they would like steal and pilfer. So she's kind of rugged, but she ends up disguising herself as a noble woman's like long lost niece, you know, has a sob story, and they take her in and she basically tries to kind of like accumulate power through them and keep up this ruse. In the background there is this masked vigilante character named the Rook, who has been going around essentially doing vigilante justice for the lower water folks, who are kind of like this underprivileged, underserved class of people in this society, against these noble people who have been like hoarding power and hoarding wealth, and he's been doing, you know, vigilante justice on their behalf, and no one knows his identity, and she kind of ends up like having these chance encounters with the Rook. And so if you like miraculous tales of Ladybug, you would like this, because it is two people who have secret identities, and like they kind of both know about each other at different instances. It is really fun, I would say. It's like very dense politically as well, and I think that it often starts threads of stories that it doesn't intend to finish, or it will like drop in what the conclusion of a certain plot, like subplot point was, like really briefly. It's very touch and go about that, and I think that's what makes it kind of hard to read at times. So that was my main issue with it, is like just keeping track of all of the ties. And the problem is it drops subplots like that, and then it wraps them up in such like jolty ways, and then those subplots actually end up being really essential to like the grand finale of the book, and then like the beginning of the next book. So you actually do need to keep track of everything that goes on, which makes it kind of hard just to keep all of the ties together. Ultimately, I kind of gave up on thinking that I was going to understand everything at all points, but by the time I came through book 2 and book 3, I did have a way better grasp on the world, and I was very impressed by just the world building in general, and I had gotten very attached to the characters, and to the point where I didn't even care if I was a little bit confused at times, because I just was kind of there for the vibes at that point and just wanted to be immersed in something and feel like these characters are my family at this point. So I did really enjoy it. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite series of all time, but I do think it was worth it to read it if you are in the mood to just be like in a very detailed world. And if the kind of world building of like Venetian inspired fantasy with a magic system that is based on like tarot and like astrology and like numerology is interesting to you, I would recommend it, because I thought it was a very unique direction. So that is Mask of Mirrors. Next book I read was Victorian Psycho, and this was a pretty fun short horror novella. This level of horror is kind of just more like slasher, I would say. Like, it's a little bit more just like bloody horror. It is about this woman named Winifred Naughty, and she gets a job as a governess for this wealthy family in the English countryside, and they're called the Pounds. And these kids that she is meant to teach and care for are super bratty, super snotty, except for the little girl who kind of has taken a liking to Winifred. The mom is like overly strict, like super mean to Winifred, but as we are stuck in Winifred's head and we get her kind of stream of consciousness, she starts having these very violent visions and these violent urges, and throughout the story she starts to act on some of that. And then we also get to uncover a little bit more about Winifred's past and understand her as this unreliable narrator, and it has a really fun ending. If you're someone who has a strong stomach and you don't mind stuff that's a little bit gross, this ending was just like a fun bash. So I would recommend that if you're looking for like a horror book and you don't mind blood, that's like just kind of fun and fast paced, and you like unreliable narrators. This was a good one. I personally liked it. I wouldn't say it blew my mind in any way. It didn't do anything like super novel or anything like that, but it was just like, it delivered on what I wanted it to deliver on, which was like gory fun, and that's what it was. So I am looking forward to the movie as well. I can imagine it being like stylistically super fun and really cool, so I'm looking forward to that too. Okay, now onto the books that I read in Japan, and I think this is kind of where the stars of the show was. I have been in my weird girl lit fic phase, or weird girl genre lit. I guess it would be genre lit, because a lot of these were actually sci-fi or fantasy. The first book I read is another novella, so I've been wanting just like short little books that deliver on the weirdness factor, and I read Thrum. This has been hyped on TikTok in particular. That's where I got this recommendation, from a very niche community on TikTok that just likes weird sci-fi. This is about a woman named Amy, way in the future, who's on an intergalactic space mission with her crew, and she is woken up from cryo sleep, except for she realizes that all of her crew have died in cryo sleep. She is the only one alive, and obviously she starts having all of this existential dread. They are like light years away from their destination, and they have drifted a little bit. So she starts like brainstorming about what to do, and then she realizes like a bunch of alarms start going off, and the hull has been damaged, and the I believe it's the engine as well has been damaged. She goes to investigate this damage, and it is like a surgical precision cut. Like, it is very clear to her this was not damage from an asteroid or any like shrapnel that hit the ship. This was done by a human, or something like a human. Something intelligent purposefully damaged her ship. So she starts spiraling further, and then she ends up getting her comms back on. Of course, none of her team back home is able to contact her, but she gets a message from this shadowy figure who has been watching her ship. And she looks out the window, and all she sees is this like black, like she describes it as like a lack of color. Like it's just a lack of anything. It's not darkness, it's like a lack of darkness. It's a lack of anything. And she realizes what she's looking at is actually a spaceship. And so she ends up encountering this space alien. I really don't want to give too much away about this book, because it's so much better to go into it with zero expectations at all. Some people described this apparently as Crimson Peak, and so a lot of reviews rated this slightly lower because they were like, this is nothing like Crimson Peak. I'm glad that no one explained it to me like that, because this is nothing like Crimson Peak at all, and it shouldn't be described that way. But this is a very, very weird kind of genre bending. At times it feels like a dark romance. Interestingly, sci-fi little horror novel with a great twist at the end, and I had no idea where we were going with this at like any point. And the visuals in this book were really chilling and really strange, and I think that it mashed up elements in such a way that like it shouldn't work, but it just did. And I personally really, really loved it, and I think I'll be recommending it to people who like really weird books and like want to like up the freak factor as much as possible. I'm gonna leave it there because I don't want to say too much, but I really did like this one, and I do think it deserves the hype, but I would not consider it anything like Crimson Peak, so keep that in mind. The next book I read is called In the Garden of Monsters, and I legitimately wrote like a 17-page dissertation on my Goodreads because I have so many conflicting feelings about this book. Yeah, I read this when I was in Japan, which was an incredible trip, by the way, so it's almost like I couldn't tell if my enjoyment of this book was maybe just being impacted by my enjoyment of my life at that point when I was in Japan, but I don't even care. I did have a really good time with this book, but I have a couple thoughts on it as well, so I kind of wanted to expand on that. This is actually a recommendation that I got off of a Twitter thread about this palazzo in Italy that has this very famous gardens. Let me get the name of the gardens. This is about Sacro Bosco. This is actually a famous garden in Italy, in this palazzo that does exist. Like, you can go visit it. So I was looking at pictures of all of these different statues. It's this garden that has these weird statues based off of like mythology, like there's like giants, and there's like this leaning like little tower. There's like like a unicorn. There's just all of this really strange imagery. There's like a goblin head where you can like go inside, and there's like actually like a big long like banquet table in there. It just feels like a little disjointed, the kind of like concept of this garden, and even like in real life, that's actually something that's debated quite a lot, of like what was the philosophy around arranging the garden in this way. Like, why did the owner of this palazzo make these choices? And I was just really interested in the imagery of this garden because it like looks so mystical to me. Like, I would love to go there. I was like just wanting to visit there, and then someone in the comments was like, oh my god, I read a book about this. It's called In the Garden of Monsters, and immediately added to my Goodreads. I was like, I don't care what this Goodreads like rating is, I'm gonna read a book about this garden, so help me God. And I did. I started it literally immediately. This takes place in the 1940s at this palazzo, and it is about this woman named Julia, and Julia is she doesn't remember her life at all. All she remembers is walking out of an amphitheater in Rome. And that's the first thing that she remembers about her life as like a full-grown adult. Anyway, so she's been trying to make money through different means. She is now a model for like various artists, and she has been hired by Salvador Dali to go to this garden and model for one of his like, you know, surrealist paintings. And so Salvador Dali is like one of the main characters of this book, which is already one of my points of contention about this book. I don't know much about Salvador Dali as like a historical figure. This is a fictionalized version of him, and I could imagine, if you know a lot about him, that this version of him would probably be quite cringe to read. So I'm glad that I didn't know anything about him, because it didn't bother me that bad. But you know, if you are an art historian, I could imagine this book being kind of cringy, although there are author's notes where I know that she knows a lot about this garden in particular. I don't know how much about Salvador Dali she knows about, or like, it's just a fictionalized version of a real person. So obviously that, I don't know, sometimes that comes off as kind of cringe to me at times. But he's described as like this very eccentric, well, that makes sense to me. He goes off on these very poetic, off-the-cuff tangents that are like, no human person, even Salvador Dali, would go off on a tangent like that, using that exact verbiage. It just like, if you read the book, you would know what I mean. But it like stuff like that, it does seem like, it's definitely the sort of book where you really have to suspend your disbelief for. But I guess I was just in the mood to do that because I was so into the imagery of this book. And I will say another thing about this book is the writing style feels a little too modern, and the dialogue feels a little too modern, to the point where like the only times that I was pulled back into the 1940s setting was like when Salvador Dali would reference a political thing or something like that. Like, very much it doesn't feel super historical for the most part, but it is a little incongruous. This book is very incongruous. I don't necessarily know that it pulled off the historical setting very well. Either way though, I had no idea where the story was going for like legitimately 80% of it, and that is very impressive for someone like me who has read a lot of books and has read a lot of weird books, so I can predict even very weird books where we're gonna go. I really had no idea what this was about. I also did not read the synopsis before reading this, and that was a huge part of it, because this is actually a Hades and Persephone retelling, which is like, oh my god, we've already heard 4,000 of those ever since 2015 happened. This does it in a slightly different way, I would say. I think this pulled it off in a much more unique manner. Salvador Dali has basically made this entire week trip for his model, and in this time he wants her to like fully embody that Aphrodite idea. Like, he wants her to become Aphrodite. So he sets up all of these elaborate meals that are prepared by the head chef Ignacio. And something is really off about this house. She starts kind of seeing ghosts, and she feels very compelled toward this garden. She starts seeing this like pulsing kind of heartbeat green light in this garden, which is where like a lot of the painting and the sketching takes place. So they're there a lot, and the meals that they have feel almost like ritualistic, and they're all themed after like different elements. Like they have like a death meal at one point, they have a life meal, like there's like an all red meal, like it's in like all of the food is red, and it's prepared by this head chef that has this like very artistic vision. But those meals were described in the book. Like, the writing takes a whole 180. Like, I wasn't overly impressed by the writing style. It didn't bother me, but I wasn't overly impressed by it until we got to those food scenes. And just the way that this author describes food and describes these meals, I was so hooked. I was so hungry. It was so beautiful and evocative. I was really impressed by the writing once we got to that. And then I looked at like this author's backlist, and like, sure enough, I don't know if this author was previously a chef or something, but she writes a lot about like a lot of fiction about food and chefs and just the art of like the culinary arts. So I think that was like a huge factor of this, and food is like a very, very big deal in this story. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect of things. And ultimately I felt like the ending was a bit rushed, and I did feel like the world building, that was like the way that they exposed things, felt very like rushed into, and it felt super info dumpy for a book that was so slow burn mysterious, and I truly had no idea where it was gonna go. And then all of a sudden at the end it was like info dump and info dump, info dump, which again is like another incongruent element of it that I just didn't feel was handled with the most grace. I felt like for a book that was impressively mysterious and really enigmatic for so long, the ending just felt like really choppy and kind of ham-fisted. I did like a lot of the decisions that were made in regards to how the story unfolds. I just like didn't like how it was exposed, I guess. Overall, I would say objectively, this book is probably a 3-star read, but as someone, I just think I read it at the right time, and it was exactly what I wanted to read, and the imagery was so good, and it felt so mystical. This book felt so mystical, and I feel like the magical realism kind of element of it, it just like really hit for me personally as someone who cares a lot about the aesthetic element of pretty much everything in my entire life. That I didn't really care. I gave it 4 stars personally, but if I was to tell another person what star rating this would have, it should probably have a 3-star on account of all those things. But I still thought it was a decent book, and if any of those elements and if that weirdness sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend it. You know, look up pictures of this garden, and if you like that vibe of that garden, I think you will like this book. By no means was it a super good book, but I just really enjoyed it for some reason, and I think I'm going to think about it a lot. For no good reason, really. Just outside of the fact that I just like, it tickled me. It just scratched my brain for some reason. I don't know why. The next book I read was a short horror novella, Comfort Me with Apples. This is one, I don't even remember where I got this recommendation from. I think I might have looked up like weird books, like I wanted to read weird books. So I listened to this on audiobook while I was on the plane, and I really liked this. I also went into this, I was told to go into this with 0 expectations whatsoever, and I did. I did not read the synopsis, I did not look into it at all. I had no idea what it's about. One person said it reminded them of Don't Worry Darling, which is a movie I haven't watched and also heard was not very good, but the premise of like a perfect society that is like a little insidious if you actually look into it is interesting enough. And that is kind of what this is about. This is about this girl, her name is Sophia, this woman, and she lives in this very perfect gated community, and at the end of each chapter it kind of says like one of the rules about like, you know, no one is allowed to be out after this hour, like you're not allowed to do so-and-so without permission. Like there's a lot of rules to this like little utopia, and it definitely has like a 1960s kind of like perfection feeling to it, the way that it's described. And Sophia is married to this man, and she wakes up every morning knowing that she was absolutely made for her husband, though we don't see too much of him because he's always at work. And all she knows really is that her husband is always gone because he is looking for a serial killer that has escaped. So him and other men of this little community have been on the hunt for a killer that has escaped. When her husband is gone, one day she ends up finding like a hairbrush with thick, dark hair stuck to it, like woman's hair. And this, she has light hair. This is not her hair, and she finds it very peculiar. Another time, like later on, in the chopping block, like for their knives, she finds a finger. And so she starts freaking out. She kind of upends their house, and she finds various body parts that clearly all belong to different people, particularly different women. And so it is kind of this like horror mystery about like, whose body parts are these? Why are they here? And a little bit more about Sophia and her identity and her husband. And it is very weird. It is very chilling. This book makes a very interesting choice that I think people found very contentious, and I personally did not. I really liked it, but I think that a lot of people would not like it because of the subject matter. And I can't tell you what it is, and I can't tell you to avoid it or not because I don't want to spoil it for literally anybody. it's not anything like disturbing or anything like that, so it's like not like a huge trigger warning thing that would bother you. I just can't say anymore. I personally really liked it. I personally thought the direction it went in and the way that it handled that topic and the way that it described that topic was refreshingly modern, and it didn't feel like it said kind of what I thought it was going to say, but it put a spin on it that felt like kind of cathartic, I thought. I don't know. I really liked all of these weird little books. I don't know, maybe I just was in a good mood, but I really liked it, and I don't want to tell you anything else about it. I do recommend it. I think you should give it a go. It's a short book, you know, if you don't like it, I don't know. It was only 2 hours of your time anyway. Oh my god. I'm sorry. I'm so dizzy because I've been drinking a lot of coffee today. Which sucks because I want to be so clear-headed to talk about this next book because I have so much that I want to say. And dizzy, this is kind of how the book made me feel anyway. It made me feel dizzy, it made me feel a little sick, it made me feel really anxious, it made me shake, it made me feel dazed. I did another audiobook, I listened to Found Audio. I found this on a subreddit about weird short little books, and I'm so glad I listened to this book. If you can listen to Found Audiobook instead of read it physically, I highly recommend it. This is, I think, objectively might be the weirdest book I've ever read in my entire life. So weird. This book is so strange and eerie. It hit that factor like perfectly for me personally. When I say I like weird books, this is kind of the ilk that I'm thinking of for the most part. This is about a research, like an audio research specialist. She is an audio archivist, so she kind of like is given various audio files or cassette tapes from different points in history, and she is very good at identifying like who the speaker is, like where it was recorded, like what time period, just based off of like the technology or what she hears. She's able to kind of dissect different elements of these audio files, and she is working in Alaska on like some research project, and she gets visited by some man she's never seen before who drops off these unnamed audio tapes, like these cassette tapes, and he says like, I have $25,000 cash. I need your 2 days of work. Just 2 days of work if you could tell me anything about these audio tapes. And she's like, $25,000 for 2 days of work? Like, sure, I'm probably not gonna be able to give you anything that detailed, but I'll do this for you because $25,000 for 2 days of work is like, I mean, that's better than I get paid, you know, for 6 months of work. So she accepts, but she warns him like, I'm probably not gonna be able to tell you anything about it. And the one thing that this guy says about these clips is you cannot publish anything about this. You cannot tell anyone about this. You cannot publish anything about this. Your life will be in danger. And then he disappears. She doesn't know who that man is. She doesn't know, you know, anything about him. He's gone. So she starts listening to these audio clips. At first she's very disengaged from it. She's like, whatever, it just sounds like, you know, some adventure journalists kind of like documenting his various interactions he's had with strange people across the globe as an adventure journalist. One thing that she notes about the audio clips is she's like, I cannot pinpoint where some of these clips are taking place. She's like, I'm listening to him speak, and at one point I hear the cars from like Boston or Chicago streets, and then at another point I hear like jungle sounds from Western Thailand, and it's like the same man talking within the same couple minutes. Like, I don't know how that's possible. And it is this man's voice. He never identifies himself, but he is an adventure journalist, and he is talking about these various experiences that he had meeting very strange people who were gifted in various ways that were considered kind of like folk legends, and he ends up like meeting them and having these very strange interactions. He is very obsessed with this concept of the city of dreams. He wants to find the city of dreams. At first he thought this is, you know, just a hypothetical place. This is an allegorical place. This doesn't actually exist. It's just a metaphor that, you know, various authors and poets and journalists have talked about over generations, you know, as a metaphor. It's not real. But as he's been interacting with these people, they've been saying these really strange things. They've been alluding to the City of Dreams as a real place. So he has this lifelong mission to seek out this City of Dreams. And another aspect of these audio tapes is at points, the speaker is interjected by an interviewer. So this isn't an interview format, this story. And this way that in this audiobook, when the speaker interjects the interviewer, I'm sorry, I have like full body chills just thinking about it. I was crying tears when I was listening to this because it is so weird. The lilt in their voice when they speak is so weird. It's different people. It's clear he's being interviewed by a shady organization of some point, and we don't know the identity of those people. We don't know what language they're speaking at one point. She can tell like they have different accents from across the globe, but they're all speaking the same language, and it is so eerie. It is so chilling, and that is a huge mystery of it too, is like, why is he being interviewed? Why are they asking him these questions? The questions that they ask him, the places they interject seem so random. They seem so odd. They ask the weirdest thing. They'll be like, and did the horses have any markings on them? Like, you won't hear from them for an hour, and then they'll be like, did the horses have any markings on them? Like, just weird stuff like that. Like, it is really, really strange. Ultimately, I don't want to give too much about this book away, but this is a metaphysical mystery kind of novel. I would only recommend this to people who are totally okay with a book that is all mystery box and like no answers. This book is not so caught up in answering any of your questions. It just wants to kind of provide this very evocative feeling, and it is very evocative. It's very atmospheric. It made me feel dazed. The kind of metaphysical questions that it proposes, like, it's something where I don't even quite understand what the point necessarily was. Like, I can't verbalize it. It's just more of like, it's meant to kind of make you feel a particular way about it. And I think that it was very successful. I came away from this book every time I stopped listening to it. I just felt, I didn't feel in my body. It really felt like an out-of-body experience at times. In my opinion, the questions weren't not answered because the author didn't know how to land the plane necessarily, but because this author understood that something being eerie or bone-chilling or feeling like legendaric mostly comes from the fact that like we don't have answers. Like, the questions, the mystery, that's what give it that, like, I don't know, that very mystical feeling, that mystified, enchanted feeling comes from not having answers. So if you want closure in a book, this will not provide that for you. But if you want to be like something eerie and strange and weird, it's not like horror necessarily, but I think that it just has this like weirdness factor, and it's mostly concerned about making you feel a particular way than it is about answering any questions that you might have. Okay, I know that I just talked about that for a really long time, so I hope that I've driven that point home. I don't know how else to describe this book. This is the weirdest book I've ever listened to in my entire life. It was such a delight to listen to it. I'm going to be thinking about it for the rest of my life, probably, because it was really, really interesting. I think a lot of people will deeply hate this book for being as confusing as it is and not answering any of your questions. I came away feeling as weird as I wanted it to make me feel, so that was Found Audio. Okay, I think I'm gonna end on that note. I am in the middle of reading a couple more books. I'll be back with a reading wrap up soon. I am getting back into the swing of things. I think I had a reading slump for the beginning of this year. I think things are going well. I think the weird books that I picked up in Japan totally changed my reading year from me. If you have any recommendations for other weird short novels, I'm all ears. Give me the weirdest you could possibly think of and I will eat it up. That is what I've been reading recently. I hope you enjoyed that. I was not off the map. I was in fact still being a reader. I was just a little busy, but I am back now. So hopefully I'll be having regular uploads again now. Anyway, have a great rest of your day. Bye.